Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Automation Hangout. This is George Ukuru. I'm very excited to welcome our special guest for today's episode, Prabhjot Singh. Prabhjot is the president as well as the CEO of the low-code process intelligence platform Pyze. Welcome, Prabhjot. How are you doing today?
I'm well, George. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited.
Thank you, Prabhjot. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. In today's episode, we are planning to have a discussion with you around how process intelligence as well as analytics can be used to identify inefficiencies, improve productivity, as well as to drive business results. As we have been seeing a lot of acceleration in the way the organizations are actually trying to transform around digital as well as in the modernization side, especially around cloud. But every organization is actually having a challenge around talent, and that's actually a crucial concern, especially around application development, where you don't have developers with the right set of skills. So, based on your experience interacting with customers as well as with your peer group, Prabhjot, like how are organizations trying to solve this problem currently?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question, George. There's a talent crunch pretty much in every industry in every role. We're certainly seeing there being more of a talent crunch around data specialists and data scientists, right? And as organizations look to modernize their systems, the conversation has to evolve beyond just we have a system that's going end of life. We've got to migrate it to the cloud or upgrade the platform. You have an opportunity to really improve the performance of that system, right? As you invest in making those updates and upgrades so that you can position the business for better agility, better innovation, rolling out new business models, right? And we've all seen over the last couple of years that that's been so critical to be able to react quickly, right? And during COVID and beyond. So being able to analyze the existing set of processes, the data that exists today, and then garner insights from that to be able to then make decisions to improve the actual business process, not just the technology, but the actual process itself is critical. And so tools like Pyze help with that kind of a problem, right? Is by using low code process intelligence, essentially doing an MRI on the process itself to identify where there's issues that you can resolve and remediate as you move forward.
Mhm. And Prabhajot, like any specific reason why you actually picked up the low-code platforms for this kind of analytics or basically on the integration side? Is that because you're actually seeing an upward trend where companies are actually shifting towards low-code as well as no-code kind of platforms?
Yeah, there's so companies are making huge investments in low codes in every dimension, right? Not just application development, but really in every context. And even with Pyze, right, we say low code process intelligence because we make it easy to analyze the process, right? Uh, in olden days, right, like 5 or 10 years ago, what's you had to do was do all this data wrangling, right? So data scientists, even today when we go to our, many of our kind of new accounts, data scientists, data analysts, business analysts are spending almost 50% of their time making sense of data so that they can process it, right?
Mhm.
And what Pyze enables is to be able to automate that process, right? Of making it really sort of a low code, low touch process to analyze the end-to-end system. And the reason we've done these integrations with other low code platforms is because organizations, as they move from these legacy systems, right, to modernize, they often are picking these low code platforms. So what we can do is we can analyze the legacy platform, right? The legacy business process, how it's implemented today, understand the business efficiency of it. And then as someone migrates to a low code platform like a Pega or OutSystems, they have the ability to then optimize and remediate those issues. And then we've got pre-built integrations, right, to make it really easy to understand how the business process performs on the other side.
Hmm.
So you can do the before and after very easily, right? Like, hey, we had this process, we made this change. How do you know you made things better, right? Because and that's the question that I always ask, right? If someone's going to invest 7 figures, 8 figures in a modernization project, you better be able to quantitatively understand how much of an impact you're making, right? So, and we don't just do projects for their sake, right? We want to do something better, faster, cheaper, right? Make the ability to deploy new features easier, right? There's always a business objective associated with these projects, so you want to be able to measure uh, the impact, and the only way you can do that is if you baseline,
Hmm.
right? Because you can improve what you can measure, right? So you start with baselining the current environment, and then as you make these changes and roll out new capabilities, uh, Pyze actually helps you understand the business performance of the new system, right?
Okay.
And once you can do that, right, now you've got a flywheel going where you can say, okay, I released this new capability. What impact did it have on the business, right?
Hmm.
And based on business priorities, we can change our backlog of features that need to be developed or things that need to be rolled out, so that you're focusing on the things that are having the most business impact, right?
Okay. So, Prabhjot, an add-on question there. So, what I've worked in product development for some time. One of the key issues that I've seen with products is basically there will be always a set of features that are never used by your users, and you actually spend a lot of time building them. And at the end of the day, you understand that people may not be using it, and but you would have already spent a lot of effort in building as well as maintaining those features. So, how does Pi try to solve that problem around unused features? So is there a way in which I can actually generate analytics around the feature usage of my product and then take what do you call actions?
Yeah, so so there's three kind of legs to the Pice tool, right? There's integrated process and task mining, right, which is sort of what we were talking about in terms of understanding how a process is executed, how steps of that process are executed. The second leg of the stool is really user experience analytics, right,
Hmm.
which is understanding at a high level what the end users experiences in using your product to do the work that they need to do, right? And part of that is understanding things like feature utilization, understanding things like screen utilization, because you're absolutely right. Like a feature gets developed, a capability gets put in the product, and then it has to be maintained forever, right? Whether someone's using it or not, we've got to keep maintaining it. We've got to keep investing time, energy, resources into that feature, and it shouldn't be like that, right? So with Pies, because we have the ability to look at how different parts of the application, or even at application level, right? This applies like when you're trying to do portfolio rationalization, you want to understand this at a macro level of how much
Hmm.
each application is being used or how each feature within each application is being used, right? So you can rationalize those. But yeah, for each individual application, we provide pretty granular understanding of and you can get down to the field level on a form,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yep.
what field, and we've had customers sort of, in order to streamline the experience, you don't want to present a end user with 40 fields and 12 of those are never used, right? You might as well take those out so that you're making the experience a more joyful experience, right, so to speak. And then once you understand, okay, this feature is not being used, well, now you have two options, right? A, let's improve it so that it is used more, right? Or B, let's take it out of the product, right? Because it's not needed. And then there's workflows, for both of those that you can kind of go through. But we've had lots of customers we've worked with. We just did a case study recently with Colliers International, right? They're like one of the largest global commercial brokerages in the world.
Hmm.
They rolled out this application for brokers, right? The people who sell the real estate buildings, um, and they're because brokers are on the move, right? So they kind of said, okay, we're going to take a lot of these enterprise systems and create a portal for the
Mm-hmm.
broker. They can access it on the run, and the product team was like, oh, this is going to be the next Instagram for brokers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and as a result, they rolled out what the things that they thought the brokers would want, and it turns out, right, some of those things were on point, and some of those features no one ever used, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they use the Pyze data to actually iterate on, the things that were relevant to the end user, right?
Mm-hmm.
And built on those capabilities to make that product relevant on a daily basis, right? Versus people logging in a couple times a week or month or whatever it was. So
Okay.
that's a very concrete kind of example of how the data is used to understand the end user experience and then to improve that experience and stickiness.
Okay, a very interesting use case, Prabhjot. The other question that I had, and there's again a challenge that I've seen in enterprises where there are multiple types of data that is actually collected. Some of them are actually collected in an automated manner. Some of them are actually entered manually, which is very time consuming. At the end of the day, you basically have data collected across multiple lines of business, or mostly the data is actually kept in silos, and it's very rarely used to generate any kind of insights. And the maximum that they'll lose maybe create some Excel sheets or Power BI dashboards that are good to see, but it doesn't give you any kind of insights to take a decision. So how is your product or platform trying to solve this problem around data existence within silos, and how is it I can use your platform to generate some kind of insights that will actually help me to improve my business or my end customer experience?
Yeah, great question. And in most enterprises, it is Excel sheets and Power BI dashboards, right? That are running the business. I mean, I'll give you a really good example of sort of a engagement we're doing now with the U.S. Air Force, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we work very closely with the U.S. Air Force, and we're right now helping them streamline their process for selecting which planes should fly which missions,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as you can imagine, it's a very complex process with many data sets, right? Everything from you've got mission details in terms of what kind of mission needs to be flown, what kind of configurations needed, how long that mission is, where that plane needs to go, right? There's a lot of kind of things there, and all of that data comes from one system. And then you've got kind of maintenance data related to the health of fleet, like what kind of maintenance is scheduled for a particular aircraft, and there's ad hoc maintenance based on effective flight hours, right? There's a lot of uh, moving parts around the planes themselves that are available to potentially fly that mission, uh, and and then you've got weather and 20 other data streams, right?
Mm-hmm.
that,
Yeah.
that sort of come in. Uh, and by and large, this data eventually makes its way into Excel sheets today, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are being used to kind of get different slices of what's the mission details or the maintenance or whatever, right? So and so what we're doing is taking data from these different disparate systems, bringing into our platform, right? And what Pyze does is, as data comes into our platform across these disparate systems, we normalize it, right? So you can kind of get apples to apples. And oftentimes, look, you've got primary keys that maybe don't match. You've got a right. So there's some kind of ETL process that you're doing during that ingestion.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but once we have the pipelines hooked up, right, then it's magic, because we we're able to kind of provide that end-to-end view of the process, right, of sort of from start to finish, even though it may span a CRM like Salesforce or Snowflake or some
Mm-hmm.
ERP system or whatever it is. And then our AI engine is actually able to analyze that data in near real time and
Mm-hmm.
produce insights in terms of, oh, here's an anomaly that I saw that maybe is interesting, or here's a change in trends that we didn't expect, or we see that we have a shortage of these parts that are going to impact order delivery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maintenance for this aircraft, for instance, right? So we should go ahead and back order these on priority so that we're not impacting the business, right? So uh, the first step is getting visibility into the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second step is being able to sort of analyze that end-to-end process, right? So that we understand what the end goal is. Uh, and and then the third step is then being able to produce those insights so that you can actually take action and do something with that data.
That's a very interesting capability, especially the anomaly detection is something that is very unique based on what I've heard, Prabhjot. And similar to you're also touching upon business processes. And when it comes to business processes, I've seen very complex business processes, especially in healthcare as well as in life sciences industry, where the business process itself will actually span across multiple different applications. It can be a legacy system, or it can be a low code, or even a digital kind of responsive website. So, how is
Right.
that Pyze actually helps to identify bottlenecks within business processes, and how is it I can use your platform to even optimize a business process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like I said, the first step is always being able to have visibility into that end-to-end process, right? So
Mm-hmm.
depending on the platforms that an application process like touches, right? So think about like the context that you just said. Like, let's say I've got a business process. Let's say it's claims processing for a healthcare company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that claim gets originated. It might be that there's a React web application, right, that's being used to originate that claim. Then you've got kind of some sort of an orchestration low code platform that's being used to process that plane, right? Do coding review and potentially kind of check for fraud and right all the different things that you have to go through before that claim either gets approved or rejected. You
Mm-hmm.
might need to do additional document collection, and and then you may have some backend systems that are running on a mainframe that are also being used to support the processing of that claim, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the the first thing you have to be able to do is get visibility into how users are interacting with each part of that system, right? And from start all the way to finish. So for web applications or any your low code platform, we've got plug and play SDKs that
Mm-hmm.
you plug our JavaScript SDK into the web app. We've got a component for for all the different low code platforms that you can just plug in, whether it's Mendix or OutSystems or Pega Appian, right? And any of these, and we sort of understand how that case flows through those platforms. And then on the mainframe side, you've typically it might be an audit log, an activity log, right, that we
Mm-hmm.
have access to. And then what we're looking for is understanding of some sort of primary key, right, that we can track from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be one or two or three primary keys, right, that you might need to map, right? But once we have that end-to-end visibility, from these different data sources, then we automate the process of capturing that data on an ongoing basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that gives you is the understanding of the different workflows, right? So how many different ways can that claim be processed?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you have the ping pong effect happening, where things, people are going back and forth, or escalations are happening, right? So once we understand all the workflows, we then kind of do business rule extraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
To identify, well, okay, what makes a claim that gets resolved in 5 days different from one that gets resolved in 50 days, right? If that's what
Mm-hmm.
I'm optimizing for. And you can select what you want to optimize for. Do I want to optimize for time? Do I want to optimize for cost? Because, or quality, right? So
Mm-hmm.
depending on kind of what you want to optimize for, we might bring in other data streams. So like for instance, like oftentimes customers will bring in pay band information of employees,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like not salary data, but like, junior employees make this much or managers make this
Yep.
much, right? And if I know if John is spending 30 minutes doing this task, well, I actually know what it costs the company, right? So then for each workflow, I can actually associate a cost, right, with each workflow to say, okay, these workflows are more efficient than others. And then from there, we kind of go and do sort of feature extraction, right,
Hmm.
around the different attributes that we understand, whether it's kind of what kind of claim it is, what so there you have sort of process data, right? That's case data. Then you've got employee data, right? Whether it's sort of my processing center in Houston
Hmm.
versus Chennai versus Bangkok, right? Whatever it is, like
Yep.
what is the efficiency of each of these centers, and then you could even bring in CRM data if I want to understand how my the claims for my gold customers get processed versus my platinum customers or
Hmm.
whatever. So so the more data we have, right, the different vectors we bring into the platform, the richer the analysis, right,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
analyze it, and then you can kind of visualize that end-to-end process across these different systems, and actually hit play and see it move, right, and kind of understand where there's hotspots. I will show like a heat map again on the process itself,
Okay.
and interact with that process to say, okay, oh, there's a hotspot in coding review. Let me figure out why that hotspot exists, and our AI engine will actually assist with that by saying, okay, this segmentation is interesting because it seems to be, indicate the difference in performance between these two call centers or whatever it is. And then you've got kind of the AI engine that's analyzing the data to identify where there's issues or new things that are emerging. So
Okay.
that's kind of the approach that people typically take with our platform. And the idea is getting into a continuous improvement mindset, right?
Yep.
Because there's there's new, like in that coding claim processing thing, there might be new codes that get
Yep.
introduced. There might be new people that we're hiring, right? There's new plans that are being rolled out, right? So we're in a dynamic world, so things are changing, and
Yep.
as things change, you don't want to wait for a week or a month or a quarter to say, oh, I have this issue, right? Because
Yep.
you
And
want
many
to be
times people don't know there is an issue until because they don't have data to actually substantiate that. And one more interesting feature that I heard is basically getting the visual representation of your entire business process. So does your platform also allows a person or a user to actually see the improvements that you can actually bring in and what how your process would actually look like once you actually make a change to the your process. For example, I'm having a bottleneck in one of the applications, I'm actually trying to solve it. So does your platform give me a simulated kind of view on how my process would be in the future once I make this change?
Yeah, so we've introduced like what if analysis. That hasn't been integrated into the process map itself yet, but
Okay.
we've got other tooling that allows you to do that.
Mhm.
But that's something that we're going to enable. It's a very natural progression to sort of do sort of, hey, what if on the process map itself.
Yep.
Uh, so I like how you're thinking.
Yep, that would be a very good feature, especially for folks who are trying to bring in these process improvements. The
Yeah.
other area that I would like to touch upon, Prabhjot, is around modernization. Because I've seen a lot of interest in organizations to actually modernize everything that is there, and it is very difficult to actually pick maybe the right set of applications that should actually be modernized because it may not make sense to actually modernize everything that you might have. So you need to actually do that kind of a discovery exercise in order to find out what should be modernized and what should not be. So what are some of the approaches that you would actually recommend for organizations who are actually getting into the journey of modernization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, look, we're working with a telco right now that has about, I want to say, close to 5,000 legacy applications, right?
Hmm.
That they're looking to modernize. So it's a big problem, right? And as part of that, there's certainly rationalization, right? So especially in the enterprise context where you're acquiring multiple companies, right? You're
Yep.
merging them together. You've got redundant systems upon redundant systems upon redundant systems, right? And generally people take sort of a bottoms up approach
Hmm.
around application rationalization. And I've got, let's say, 5 applications that kind of do the same thing. or 50 applications that do the same thing. Let me sort of go through this. I call it sort of spreadsheet based analysis of technical debt. Go interview a bunch of people, understand the business value of that application, right? And then kind of produce a report of which application should be sunset or consolidated or
Yep.
modernized, right? Like that's generally the process that's used today. What we've had a lot of success with is actually taking a top down approach.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of focusing on the application first, focusing on the business process that those applications support.
Mm-hmm.
So monitoring the end to end performance of business processes and then drilling down to understand how those different applications support the execution of that business process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I've got kind of, let's say, uh, uh, a plan and build process for installing 5G towers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's different applications that are used for different functions, right? Everything from
Yep.
kind of site audits to material sourcing to the PLM process, et cetera, et cetera. So starting with the business process, understanding the relative effectiveness of that process, and then looking at how different applications support those processes. Because what that gives you is an understanding of the user experience, an
Mm-hmm.
understanding of the relative effectiveness of each application, everything from usage metrics, what we're talking about before, like how
Yep.
well those apps used, understanding the latency and the technical performance of those
Mm-hmm.
applications, right? Getting down to that level, and then doing the apples to apples comparisons, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then because if you can get down to the feature level of from a business performance and technical performance monitoring, now the conversation is not around application, just rationalizing applications. It's what features are going to be the best features to include in the modernized app, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I might want to take a feature or two from application A feature or two from application B, and then kind of create sort of a best of breed application that is modernized, right? And then you can consolidate or sunset those others, and we can monitor them right side by side to see, okay,
Yep.
how the business performance is. And you would do that kind of on a domain by domain basis, right? So like obviously you can't boil the ocean if I've
Mm-hmm.
got 500 or 5,000 apps. So you start with one domain, you sort of understand how business processes get executed. And the other ancillary benefit of doing this approach is you actually also wind up optimizing the business process.
Yeah, that's very important because in the bottom up process, you don't approach, you don't basically know what business process you are touching. Only once you start your modernization, you start thinking about the business process. That's a very different, and I would say I think that that's the right approach because until you actually look at your business process, end of the day, it's all about business process, not about applications. Because the end
That's right.
customer is actually going to look at the business process rather than actually the outcome from each of the applications. It makes a lot of sense. The top down approach makes a lot of sense. But I've not seen a lot of organizations as well as service providers taking that route. That's the reason I was asking this question in the first place. Because everywhere
Yeah,
what I've seen is like there's a 3 to 4 month or even 6 month discovery exercise that is done to
right.
actually find out what needs to be modernized. And then after you actually do that exercise, then afterwards when you start your modernization exercise, that is when you're actually trying to map the business processes, which is
That,
which
that,
is too late
that,
into the game.
100% right. And yeah, so this is an approach we've been pioneering as a company. You're
Mm-hmm.
right; it's not really widely adopted in the market, but we're getting really really good feedback from customers, from partners on this approach. And the other thing that this does is it takes a lot of the subjectivity out of that kind of 4 to 6 month process that you're talking about, because it's you're doing data driven decisions, and
Yep.
B, it speeds up that process too. Like not the application development process, right? That's going to take as long as it can take, but the data collection, data analysis process, right,
Yep.
is much much faster. So we can speed that up by like 50, 60% probably.
And there's another use case that I can think about, Prabhjot, and especially when you actually have legacy applications that has been there in organizations for years together. Very rarely people have documented those business processes. So everything is actually there with the SME, but no one would have made an effort in order to actually document those business processes. And especially what I've seen in the testing world, especially when you're doing end-to-end testing, that is where the team really struggles to understand what the business processes are, what are the different variations of those business processes, and also understand like how customers are actually using that in real production. That's something, if we can actually get such a view around the business process, it will really help everyone, including the testing groups who are actually involved in end-to-end testing.
Yeah.
Finally, one area that I have not touched upon is basically around customer related analytics. So, what are some of the features or capabilities that you're offering around maybe customer service or around maybe customer happiness that can be actually used in order to improve maybe both the overall experience of the end customer as well as to actually improve maybe something like a product adoption?
Yeah. Gosh. So there's a lot there. Right. Let me talk through just a couple of use cases,
Okay.
specific to sort of like, when we think about kind of customer adoption of a system, right? That's really kind of understanding user journeys and
Yep.
right. So in Pies, we've got this um, pretty dynamic ability to switch between the paradigm that we use to analyze a process, right? So you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of go from, I want to switch from a primary key that's a claim ID, right? Of the going back to that example
Yep.
that we looked at earlier, to user ID, right? So you can sort of say, okay, I want to understand the user's customer journey, right? To either